Well, again, my name is Kris Blackmarr, and I wanted to introduce myself on this first go around here and kind of show you a little bit of what I do and what I'm going to be presenting here. The Sandbox Series is something a little bit different. What I'm going to be doing is making 4 different models, basically the same type of model from scratch, but I will be going through in detail for newer modelers exactly how to scratch build something. And my focuses are really going to be on different materials and different weathering techniques for those materials. I have approximately 50 years of modeling experience. I've been an award-winning modeler, but my big point here is not so much the awards as I much more enjoy the teaching aspect of the modeling. I go through and often document a lot of my builds on some other websites. Model railroad-lines.com was the big one until it just recently came down and I lost about 10 years worth of work there. Along with documenting things online, I have presented multiple clinics at national and regional NMRA, the National Narrow Gauge Conventions, and other train shows, primarily in the Colorado area. I have been a division chair for a few years in a NMRA division for the AP program. So I have some knowledge about judging, as well as tips and things that I can provide to the end modeler for their modeling experiences, and I'll be passing those along in my documentation. Now, what I'm going to be doing that's a little bit different here is I will be going through and presenting my models in just real quickly, kind of an overview of them, but I will then be submitting a file that will go along to the webmasters, and hopefully they'll be able to put those files up onto the New Tracks website, and we'll create kind of a modeling notebook, and I will go through and create an index and other things on that, so that if you're interested in just roofing or something like that, you'll be able to come back and look at ways to do that. I do not have a home layout, but I am a dioramist primarily. I also have been for about a dozen years now a member of the Slim Rails Narrow Gauge Modular Club out of Colorado Springs. My focus has been modeling in narrow gauge, in O scale and HO scale. My O scale modeling has been ON3. I am a big proponent that knowledge is a key here, and that's the thing that we really need to get information to the various modelers out there and newbies, as well as hopefully give some old tricks, or some old modelers some new tricks with some items that they may not normally use. I am really focused on weathering. So I do a lot of teaching of coloring with soft pastels, inks, and washes. Scenery is also another side passion, and I'll touch on that a little bit when we do dioramas. But primarily, I focus on the structures and the weathering of those various different structures, as that's really one of the things that somebody sees when they're looking at your models. The things that I will be presenting are actually tools, materials, and tips that I have garnered from the military modelers, as well as the fantasy modelers. Those guys are kind of way ahead of us, in terms of weathering techniques and in terms of using different paints and other coloring materials in ways that we typically don't apply. I also will be bringing in a healthy dose of fine arts input. My spouse is an artist, and she has a lot of books like or magazines, pastels and things that lying around that I pick up and read, and I'll be presenting some of that information intertwined in some of the models that I will be building. So the overall thing here is that I'm going to be bringing a lot of fine arts knowledge, which will hopefully bridge all of the scales and all of the modeling interests out there, whether you're doing a large layout or a diorama. Understand that a lot of my modeling techniques will not fit a large layout, because quite frankly, you guys don't have the time for that. But if you do one or two structures that are close to the leading edge of your layout, then the viewer's eye will naturally transform that information that you have seen onto other models in the background. And so it'll give your overall layout a much more completed look. The notes that I will be presenting will again be very detailed. There'll be tutorial type notes, and they'll be available online for additional reference. So the idea here is that a lot of times when I read notes on how to build a model or something, or if I'm looking at somebody's notes or tutorials, they may say, well, you go in and you paint it using a stippling method. Well, yeah, I know what a stippling method is, but what type of brush did they use? What size was that brush? Those are all as important as the actual technique. And so I will be including that information in the presentations. I will also be bringing in some non-traditional materials. One of the things that I have taught for many years is in balsa foam and using balsa foam because of the solar wind power. Balsa foam is very difficult to get a hold of these days, but we can use a lot of those techniques and tools in a urethane foam or a carving foam blocks, and I'll be bringing that information to you. I'll also, as I'm covering some of these oddball materials, I will be presenting additional alternatives to those materials that you could utilize to get the same effect. Again, I'm going to be bringing in some fine arts techniques. One thing might be spraying from the underside of a tree, for an example, with a dark black brown, or excuse me, black blue spray mist to color the underside of the trees, to tree leaves, to help produce a more shadow effect. And most of the structures that I will be presenting will be presented from plans that you can see in older modeler magazines or in books that you can get your hands on. I don't build a whole lot of kits, so we've got other forum programs here that will address the kits. I'm going to be trying to address a few other things. We all have a lot of old modeling magazines around, but how many times do we actually make use of them to build something out of? And so I'm going to be looking at that. So again, the bottom line here is that I'm presenting the way that I model, and I understand, and I will be the very first one to admit that there's 800 different ways to skin the cat when we're talking about this hobby and obtaining various effects. So what I'm trying to present to you is just one or two ways that you may be able to produce the effect, but I will give you the very high, very, very detailed information on ways to produce those effects. I also will invite you to share your ideas and thoughts with me and with everybody here on the forum, because we're all here to share our information. And the biggest thing about all of this is don't be afraid to try to make these models. The models that I'll be presenting are often very small models that you can make in just a little bit of time, oftentimes out of your scrap box. And the big point here is to go on ahead and get modeling. Don't let it just sit around and be an armchair modeler, because you'll get a lot more satisfaction out of the hobby if you actually get in there and get active on it. And with that, that kind of ends my introduction to this. And with the next presentation, we'll be jumping into one of the first models, which will be a small cabin. And that's it.